Hey everybody, welcome in. This is Adam here. We're about to start developing our own scoring system, and this is the first in a series of videos where we start to investigate creating scores and category scores for our fitness testing or for our performance testing. In this video specifically, we're going to go over max-min scoring. Or what I mean by that is creating scores that are based on the maximum and minimum values in your data set, but we're going to expand upon that and give you an opportunity to set conditions around it. You'll understand what I mean in a second and realize how important this is. We're just going to go through one example with each of the following videos, and then in the final one, I'm going to ask you to pick what type of scoring system you want and apply it for the other metrics. And we'll do this all together. But one important consideration to make is that we're going to go over a bunch of different ways of scoring things, and ultimately you don't want to choose all of the ways to score things. You're going to want to choose one. I'm going to go through them all and talk about the differences between them all so that you can make an informed decision. But in the end, you're just going to kind of copy one over and use that for your scoring, or that's what I would do at least. So our example metric is going to be CMJ average, or counter movement jump average, which is right here in column M in this data set. We want to create a score from 0 to 100 for all of our athletes to represent how well they did on this test, or how well they did for this metric. And there are a couple of different ways we can break that down. So let's call this cell right here, we'll call this CMJ, I'm going to call it CMJ score. And then in parentheses it goes 0 to 100. Now to start this calculation, we're going to need two things. We're going to need the maximum value and the minimum value for the metric. To do that, let's get the maximum value first. Right here, and don't worry about this for now, we're going to do this step by step and use cells that will be filled with other things later. Go equals max, open parenthesis, and select column N, where the CMJ is. And close the parenthesis and click enter. That's how we get the maximum value. To get the minimum value, we can use the exact same formula. So let's copy this formula and we'll paste it over here. But instead of max, we'll use the term min to get the minimum value in that column. And click enter. Now let's work on the start of our formula to start creating this score. The first thing that we're going to need to do is in this cell right here, AB2, where the first score is, or the score for Jim Harding is, this athlete, is we're going to do equals, and then Jim Harding's value for the CMJ average, which is right here in cell M2, minus the minimum value in the data set, which is 14.1. And click enter. Now all this is the difference between Jim Harding's value and the minimum value. Let's wrap that in parentheses, because what we're going to do is we're going to divide this by the difference between the maximum and minimum value in the data set. So if we put this in parentheses and then divide by, and let's do another parenthesis, this value, which is the maximum, minus this value, which is the minimum, and close the parenthesis and click enter, we have a value between 0 and 1. To make this value at 100, we have two options. The first is we can turn it into a percentage, which will give us a percentage sign as well. But let's undo that. The other way is to multiply this entire thing by 100. So after the equal sign, equals 100 asterisk, or times all this stuff. And click enter. And now we just have to make a couple of substitutions. Because we're looking at cells where we calculate the maximum and minimum value, right? AD2 is a calculation, and AC2 is a calculation. So what we can do is we can replace these calculations that we have in here. So we have max m to m is what's in AC2. We can copy that. Go into our formula, and where we see AC2, exchange that for max m to m. And click enter. And now where we see AD2, we can replace this calculation to find the minimum value. Copy that. Go into our formula, and wherever we see AD2, we can paste in our equation to get the minimum value. And click enter. Now we can copy and paste this formula down. We'll probably get errors if someone doesn't have CMJ averages. We can copy and paste it down, and we'll get a bunch of values between 0 and 100. Now how this score currently works is that every single person in this data set for every event will get a value between 0 and 100, and the best performance of all time for all the players or all the athletes will be a 100. The worst performance of all time for all the athletes will be a 0. Now this is in total disregard to the team that the athlete's on, to the position that the athlete plays, or for the event in question. Now you might want to have a score specific for each team and maybe for each event, right? You might want each athlete to be scored for a training camp and then scored again for another training camp against another cohort. And I'm going to show you how to do those things now. Let's do what we just did. What I mean by that is let's create the calculations outside of our formula and then put them in. The only change that we have to make is instead of having the maximum value and the minimum value with max and min, we need to use Maxifs and Minifs to put in criteria. To do that, I'm going to move over again, and maybe I'll call this max, just for now, max min, Maxifs, Minifs. Right here, we'll use our Maxifs formula. We'll go equals Maxifs, open parenthesis, and the first thing that we need is the range that we want to get the maximum value of. And in that case, let's choose column M, or our CMJ average, comma, and now we give it a criteria range and then a criteria that it has to be equal to. So for example, if we just say we want the maximum value of column M, which is all of our CMJ averages, when column M, or the CMJ average, comma, is, quote, greater than 0, end quote, and close the parenthesis and click enter. Now what we've said is we want to get the maximum CMJ value, CMJ average value, when it's greater than 0. And that's the same as the maximum value. But I want to show you something simple to show you how Maxifs works. Let's say that we just wanted to get the maximum value for the team that the athlete plays on. And when we do that, if we do the same thing with the minimum, we'll be creating a score per team, right? And that might be important because you might not want to pool together. Let's say you're working with players in the American Hockey League and players in the National Hockey League, or you're working with female soccer players and male basketball players. You may not want to combine those things together and create a score where everyone's included in that same framework. So, to do this by team, let's remove that criteria that we added. Go to the team, which is right here. Let's say when the team, comma, is equal to the team that's in E2, or the team that this athlete is on. And close the parenthesis and click enter. And again, it's the same as the max. That's because everyone is on the same team because I made an adjustment. Give me 1 second and I'll apply different teams. Sorry about that. I just applied different teams. Now when we look at this Maxifs formula, we get a different number than the overall maximum, which indicates that the maximum value is not coming from the Toon Squad team. The maximum value for the CMJ average is from someone on the Monstars. But in any case, now what we're doing is we're starting to create a score for that team. So if we copy this formula and we paste it over to the Minifs, or to the Minifs column, AF, and we change max to min, and click enter, now we have the minimum value for that team. And if we decide to put these formulas in our CMJ score from 0 to 100, let's actually add a column here. And we'll say CMJ team score. And then we'll add another column, because we're going to do this one more time. And we'll call this CMJ event and team score, so that we create a score for the team and the event in question. Now what we can do is let's copy this formula that we have for the CMJ normal score, paste it in here and click enter. And now we'll exchange the mins with the min-ifs that we have calculated here, and the maxes with the maxifs that we have calculated here. So let's copy this maxifs formula that we have, but not the equal sign. And we'll go to this CMJ team score and replace the max m to m with that maxifs formula, and click enter. Of course, after we remove a parenthesis. And we'll replace the min with this minus formula. So let's copy that. Go to our CMJ team score and replace the min m to m with this min ifs formula, and replace this min m to m with this min ifs formula. And we just need to put the parenthesis at the end here, and parenthesis before the maxifs because those got removed by accident, and click enter. And if we copy this formula now and we paste it down a little bit, and let's remove a bunch of decimal points, one thing that we notice is that these values are different, right? So this score is different from the team score. This score is different from that. All the scores are different. Now, why are these negative values here? What's going on there? That's because this person doesn't have a CMJ average. And that's okay, because in the end, we'll accommodate for that. So don't worry about the negative numbers. But what you do have to understand is that these are two different scores, and they're assessing fundamentally different things. The first score is assessing the athlete in question. So in this example, Jim Harding, for this session that they were in, they're assessing Jim Harding in relation to everyone else in the data set for all time, and giving them a score based off of that. In this score, we're saying, all right, we're considering Jim Harding in respect to his cohort, which is his team. So it's comparing all of whatever Jim Harding did right here in this session to all of Jim Harding's sessions and all of his teammates' sessions for all time, but excluding anyone that is not on his team, which is the Toon Squad. And for this person, for Stephen Murray, their score is based on everyone who's on the Monstars and excludes everyone who's on the Toon Squad. Now, in our final score that we'll create is not only will we consider the team that the athlete's on, but we'll also consider the event in question. So imagine you have 5 teams that participate in a training camp. Each of these teams will be graded against each other for that training camp. And let's say that all those teams also have an in-season phase. Then all of those teams will be graded against each other for in-season, but not combined together. So Team 1 will be compared to Team 1 for training camp. Team 2 will be compared to Team 2 for training camp. And during the season, Team 1 will be compared to Team 1 for in-season. And Team 2 will be compared to Team 2 for in-season. But there's no cross between teams, and there's no cross in scores between those different events. That's what we're doing now. So let's add more columns. We'll say Maxifs event. We'll say Minifs event. And what we can actually do is let's copy the Maxifs formula that we already have, because we're halfway there, and paste it here for the Maxifs event. And now we just need to add in another piece of criteria, comma. So right now we're saying that we want the maximum CMJ average when the team is equal to the team that this athlete in row 2 is on. And also, let's add another criteria range, and also when this season phase Well, we could use the season phase, or we could use the event ID, which is the season phase and year combined. Let's do that, because then it's actually each specific event. So Training Camp 2019 will be treated differently from Training Camp 2020. And this is, we'll see what happens here, and it'll show you clearly what the differences are. So let's select the event ID, which is column I. So column I, comma, is equal to whatever is in I2, or this row in question. Close the parenthesis and click enter. And let's do the same thing for the minifs. So we'll copy our minifs formula, paste it over by the minifs event, and then remove the parenthesis, do a comma. So we want the minimum CMJ average when the team is equal to the team that the athlete's on, and also when the event, comma, is equal to the event that that athlete participated in at that time. And we can close the parenthesis and click enter. And now for this CMJ event and team score, let's copy our formula here. I know this is getting to be a lot. I'm sorry. We'll paste it in here and click enter. So this is just the same as the CMJ team score. Now let's replace this Maxifs with our new Maxifs over here, the Maxifs event, and we'll replace this minifs with our minifs event. So we'll go to our Maxifs event, copy this formula but not the equal sign, go to our CMJ event and team score, and replace this Maxifs, but make sure we have a parenthesis before it, and click enter. And now we'll go to our minifs event, and we'll copy that formula, go to our CMJ event and team score, and replace this minifs with that, paste it in, and replace this minifs with that, and paste it in, and click enter. And now let's copy this formula and paste it down a little bit. And let's remove some decimals. And now what we're going to see is that for each team, let me just hide a bunch of stuff. Let me just hide a bunch of stuff so that we can see what's going on. Let's hide this. Hide these columns, and let's hide all this stuff. And yeah, we don't care about position either, or data. I don't care about that. Hide all this stuff. What we're going to see that is for each team event combination, someone is going to have a 0, and someone is going to have a 100, and everyone else filters in between. So, Jim Harding. This person apparently had the worst CMJ average for their team for that event. So they get a 0. Okay, Toon Squad Training Camp 2019. Here's a 100 for the Toon Squad Training Camp 2019, which means that this person had the best CMJ average for the Toon Squad for that event. Now, if we look at the CMJ team score, what this also means is that this person had the best CMJ average for their team for all of the events. But if we look at the CMJ score from 0 to 100, this means that this person did not have the best CMJ average of all people, of all teams, of all events. So someone had a better CMJ average than this person at one point. So these are 3 different scores that mean 3 different things, and either of them are fine, and they're all from 0 to 100. You can have as many criteria as you want. One important thing to mention is that if you do it per team, that means that there will be a 0 and a 100 value for each team no matter what. If you do it for the CMJ event and the team, or if you do it for the event and the team, then there will be a 0 and 100 value for each team event combination no matter what. Right? So we saw Jim Harding has a 0 for the Toon Squad Training Camp 2019. Well, these 2 people actually, I think that they have the same CMJ average value. Both have 0s for the Monstars for Training Camp 2019, and there should be a 100 for the Monstars for Training Camp 2019, which is right here. So there's going to be a 0 value and a 100 value for each team event combination now. Now, the reason why I went over all of this is so that you can think about the data that you have and how you want to score things in the way that it makes most sense. And let me give you a quick example. When I'm communicating information with coaches after a training camp, it's easiest for me if they're seeing scores of things. I say the best person gets a 100, the worst person gets a 0, and everyone else fills in between based on how well they did. And this is an important thing to talk about with these scores too, is that these are normalized, or these are scaled so that the best value is a 100, and if something is close to the best value, it'll be close to 100. But if it's not close to the best value, for example, let's say that my jump height is 30, and the next best is 25, and everyone else kind of has 24 to 25, then I'll get a 100, but everyone else is going to be like in the 50s because nothing is really close to my jump height. So when you're looking at the scores, they're weighted accordingly, where if you're way above and beyond everyone else, or you're way below everybody else, you're going to see that represented in the score. Whereas what we'll get to in the next video is we'll get to percent ranks, which are different in that they're a ranking system, so that let's say that I jump 30 inches, you jump 25, and everyone else is in the 25, 24 range. Even if I jump 100 inches, I mean, I'll get a 100, but if you jump 20 inches, you're going to get like a 98 or a 95, depending on how many athletes are in that data set, because it's a ranking, right? You're still next ranked, even though you're 80 inches below me, or whatever the case might be. So that's kind of a major difference between percent ranks and the way that we're doing scores here. And we'll go over that in the next video. But for now, I hope this video was helpful. I'm going to leave these 3 scores here, and in the next one, we'll do percent ranks in this exact same way, where we consider these 3 different things with the percent rank formula. And then we'll do the same thing with z-scores, and then we'll get into t-scores, and finally, you'll make your choice on the type of scoring system you want based around what we talk about with all these scores and how you want to do things. Before we move on to the percent rank stuff, let's accommodate for these negative values, or for when someone doesn't have a CMJ average. So let's unhide some things. Let's unhide this stuff, and we're going to keep it this way because we don't need all this other fluff. So let's hide these and hide everything else except for the CMJ average, because that'll just make it easier to look at as we move forward through the rest of the scoring. Now what we need to say is if the CMJ average in this row, if it's blank, then we want this cell or the score to be blank. If that's not true, then we'll just calculate the score like we were doing anyways. And to do that, before this equal sign, we can say if, open parenthesis, if this, or cell M2, equals, quote, quote, or is blank, comma, then what do we want Google Sheets to do? We want Google Sheets to make the cell, quote, quote, or blank, comma. If that's not true, or if that cell is not blank, then we want to perform this calculation. Let's just remove that space and close the parenthesis and click enter. Perfect. I'll copy and paste that down in a moment. But first, let's do it again for the CMJ team score. I'm going to do this pretty quickly because we've already gone through this formula now. So if, open parenthesis, CMJ average equals, quote, quote, or is blank, comma, we'll make this, quote, quote, or blank, comma. If that's not true, then we will perform the calculation that we were going to perform anyways, and click enter. And we'll do the same thing right here for our last score. If, open parenthesis, M2, or the CMJ average, equals, quote, quote, or is blank, comma, let's make it, quote, quote, or blank, comma. If that's not true, then let's perform this big calculation that we're going to do anyways, close the parenthesis and click enter. And now if we copy these 3 formulas and let's just paste them to the bottom of our sheet, why not? Now there are no negative values and everything looks clean, and we have scores for every single session, for every single person. And that's about it. I hope this video was helpful. If you enjoyed it and got something out of it, please make sure to give it a like, and make sure you subscribe to the channel before you leave if you haven't already. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.